Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Friedrich Nietzsche's The Spoke Zarathustra book. It's nerdy, witty, and creative. Let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On Redemption. When Zarathustra crossed over the great bridge, one day the cripples and beggars surrounded him, and a hunchback spoke to him thus. Behold, Zarathustra, the people too learn from you and come to believe in your doctrine. But before they will believe you entirely, one thing is still needed. You must first persuade us cripples. Now here you have a fine selection, and verily an opportunity with more than one handle. You can heal the blind and make the lame walk, and from him who has too much behind him, you could, perhaps, take away a little. That I think would be the right way to make the cripples believe in Zarathustra. So make the lame walk, heal the blind. Sounds a little bit like he's trying to make his character really Jesus-like. I mean, you can get a little bit of that here with him. But Zarathustra replied thus to the man who had spoken. When one takes away the hump from the hunchback, one takes away his spirit. Thus teach the people. And when one restores his eyes to the blind man, he sees too many wicked things on earth, and he will curse whoever healed him. So it's making it sound like not having that faculty saves you from a lot of anguish. But whoever makes the lame walk does him the greatest harm. For when he can walk, his vices run away with him. Thus teach the people about cripples. And why should Zarathustra not learn from the people, when the people learn from Zarathustra? I agree with that sentiment. Everyone can learn something from somebody. So I'm not being arrogant enough to think that you can't learn from others. Now the vices running away with that person is clever, right? But this is what matters least to me, since I have been among men. To see that this one lacks an eye, and that one an ear, and a third a leg, while there are others who have lost their tongues or their noses or their heads. I see and have seen what is worse, and many things so vile, that I do not want to speak of everything, and concerning some things I do not even like to be silent. For there are human beings who lack everything except one thing of which they have too much. Human beings who are nothing but a big eye, or a big mouth, or a big belly, or anything at all that is big. Inverse cripples, I call them. So a big eye, to me, it's almost like the eye of Saruman, you know? Something that's always watching and lurking and perpetual patrol. Big mouth, someone who doesn't know how to keep their mouth shut. So they're constantly boasting, bragging, gossiping, toting about. Big belly, so a glutton, someone who cannot control their appetites. And when I came out of my solitude and crossed over this bridge, for the first time I did not trust my eyes, and looked again, and said at last, an ear as big as a man. I looked still more closely, and indeed underneath the ear was something moving, something pitifully small and wretched and slender. Interesting. And no doubt of it, the tremendous ear was attached to a small, thin stalk. But this stalk was a human being. That's weird. If one used a magnifying glass, one could even recognize a tiny, envious face. Okay, so a tiny, envious face, someone who's maybe eavesdropping a lot. Eavesdropping. Also, that a bloated little soul was dangling from the stalk. The people, however, told me that this great ear was not only a human being, but a great one. a genius, but I never believed the people when they spoke of great men, and I maintained my belief that it was an inverse cripple who had too little of everything and too much of one thing. So an inverse cripple, too little of everything and too much of one thing. So we're getting here at balance. That's what I'm seeing. When Zarathustra had spoken thus to the hunchback, and to those whose mouthpiece and advocate the hunchback was, he turned to his disciples in profound dismay and said, Verily, my friends, I walk among men as among the fragments and limbs of men. This is what is terrible for my eyes, that I find men in ruins and scattered as over a battlefield or a butcher field. So a battlefield or a butcher field. Now, one could argue that the battlefield is, in and of itself, a butcher's field, because the battlefield leaves your body part here, 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 scattered about, right? Now, the butcher, well, it can be more systematic, right? Clean cut, less splattered, more precision. And when my eyes flee from the now to the past, they always find the same fragments and limbs and dreadful accidents, but no human beings. The now and the past on earth, alas, my friends, that is what I find most unendurable, and I should not know how to live if I were not also a seer of that which must come. A seer, a willer, a creator, a future himself, and a bridge to the future, and alas, also, as it were, a cripple at this bridge. All this is Zarathustra, a cripple at this bridge. And you too have often asked yourselves, who is Zarathustra to us? What shall we call him? And like myself, you replied to yourself with questions. That's kind of funny. Replying to yourself with questions. Is he a promiser or a fulfiller? A conqueror or an inheritor? So that's an interesting thing here. Someone who makes promises, someone who fulfills their oath, someone who conquers, takes what is theirs, inherits it so they don't have to work as much for it. An autumn, an autumn is very still, changing, lots of death. A plowshare, a physician, or one who has recovered. That one's interesting. Is he a poet, or a truthful, a liberator, or a tamer, good or evil? A tamer, someone who has the capacity to tame stuff, has a lot of patience. The liberator is quite different than the conqueror, isn't he? Because the liberator removes the yoke of the conqueror. I walk among men as among the fragments of the future. So men being fragments of the future? Because remember he said over here that he went and saw a bunch of fragments and limbs on the fields, accidents but not human beings, butcher's field. The future which I envisage, and this is all my creating and striving, that I create and carry together into one what is fragment and riddle and dreadful accident. And how could I bear to be a man if man were not also a creator and a guesser of riddles and redeemer of accidents? A guesser of riddles? It's funny that he talks about riddles, because I've been reading some, and some are really clever, and I like a good riddle, because some are super clever. One was, I'm gonna butcher it, but I want to put them on the community tab, but it was, I hold water, but I have a lot of holes. What am I? A sponge! Because a sponge is porous? Oh, that's so funny. To redeem those who live in the past, and to recreate all it was into a thus I willed it. That alone should I call redemption. It was into a thus I willed it. So I willed it. Now as a Muslim we say inshallah, if Allah wills. That alone should I call redemption. Will, that is the name of the liberator and joy bringer. So he really puts a lot of emphasis on the will. Thus I taught you, my friends, but now learn to this, the will itself is still a prisoner. Yeah, I would agree with that. The will can be a prisoner. Willing liberates, that's true. But what is it that puts even the liberator himself in fetters? It was, that is the name of the will's gnashing of teeth and most secret melancholy. Powerless against what has been done, he is angry, spectator of all that is past. That will cannot will backwards, and that he cannot break time, and time's covetousness. Ooh, so he cannot break time, and time's covetousness. Time's covetousness. It's very poetic. That is the will's loneliest melancholy. So the will versus time. Think about that for a second. We don't know how long we'll be on Earth. You really want something to happen, you're working towards it. And then time, which is controlled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because none of us know when we'll return to Allah. It's a snatcher. You know, it's fascinating. Time is a system that humans cannot escape. Cannot escape. We try in terms of beauty, right? Women doing surrogacy, IVF, because they don't want to have kids when their body tells them this is the time. And instead they say, no, we have to have man-made forms of time where college first, career, money first, then children, when the body says, no, this is the clock. Not your schedule. This is the clock. And instead of obeying our biological clock, which was put there by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we let the LinkedIn crowd, the college, and the banking system tell us, no. You gotta obey our time. So the will of a mother to say, I will have these children by the permission of Allah. Well, time will come and covet your time. And then you'll be more lonely and melancholy. This is very poetic, I must say. Willing liberates. What means does the will devise for himself to get rid of his melancholy and to mock his dungeon? To mock his dungeon. Alas, every prisoner becomes a fool, and imprisoned will redeem himself foolishly. That time does not run backwards. That is his wrath. Ooh, my goodness, man. Time does not ride... Oh, that's a great line right there. Time's wrath is that it doesn't go backwards. That which was in the name of the stone he cannot move. And so he moves stones out of wrath and displeasure, and he wreaks revenge on whatever does not feel wrath and displeasure as he does. Thus the will the liberator took to hurting, and on all who can suffer, he wreaks revenge for his inability to go backwards. This is indeed, this alone is what revenge is. The will's ill will against time, and it was. That's true. A lot of revenge is that you can't go back in time and fix what it was, and now you have to fix it in the now by getting back that time, the savoriness of what was taken from you. Like when a woman puts a lot of energy into a man and then they break up, like she was a Barbara the Builder and he leaves her for a younger woman and she like helped build him up and like helped him with his business and stuff like that. And she like and like she looks tired and she's burnt out and she helped to build him and accepted him when he had nothing, and then when he got money he took a whore, someone who was a bimbo who didn't have to put in anything and now gets the speech. She was at the finish line and she wasn't part of the struggle. And then the woman, when she divorces that man, like she put in so much time and effort, she can't go backwards. So now it's time for revenge, to get that sweet taste in your mouth, to be like, I put so much time in, years I can't get back, now it's time for revenge. So if you think of this example, you can actually see his poetic point in real life. Verily a great folly dwells in our will, and it has become a curse for everything human that this folly has acquired spirit. The spirit of revenge, my friends, has so far been the subject of man's best reflection. And where there was suffering, one always wanted punishment too. For punishment is what revenge calls itself. With a hypocritical lie, it creates a good conscience for itself. That's a good point, yeah, that's very true. When you want to punish someone and you're getting revenge, you feel like it's justified. Yeah, that's true. Because there is suffering in those who will, inasmuch as they cannot will backwards. Willing itself and all life were supposed to be a punishment. And now, cloud upon cloud rolled over the spirit, until eventually, madness preached. Everything passes away, therefore everything deserves to pass away, and this too is justice, this law of time, that it must devour its children. Thus preached madness. Wow. So, everything passes away, therefore everything deserves to pass away. Ooh. Things are ordered morally according to justice and punishment. Alas, where is redemption from the flux of things, and from the punishment called existence? The punishment called existence. Thus preached madness. So we got a pattern here: preached madness, preached madness. Can there be redemption if there is eternal justice? Ooh. Alas, the stone it was cannot be moved. All punishments must be eternal too. Thus preached madness. No deed can be annihilated. How could it be undone by punishment? You can't undo it, but you can get the sweetness of revenge, vengeance. This is what is eternal in punishment called existence. That existence must eternally become deed and guilt again, until the will should at least redeem himself, and willing should become not willing. But, my brothers, you know this fable of madness. I led you away from these fables when I taught you. The will is a creator. That's a potent line right there. Taking a lump of clay, you fashion it into a cup. Your will created its cup. Now, you have to be careful though, because Allah is the one who creates everything in existence. But that doesn't mean humans don't have a creative capacity, right? All it was is fragment, a riddle, a dreadful accident, until the creative will says to it, but thus I willed it. Until the creative will says to it, but thus I will it, thus shall I will it. But has the will yet spoken thus? And will that happen? Has the will been unharnessed yet from his own folly? Has the will yet become his own redeemer and joy-bringer? Has he unlearned the spirit of revenge and all gnashing of teeth? And who taught him reconciliation with time and something higher than any reconciliation? So reconciliation is part of forgiveness. For that will which is the will to power. So the will to power must will something higher than any reconciliation. But how shall this be brought about? Who could teach him also to will backwards? Willing backwards? At this point in his speech, it happened. Zarathustra suddenly stopped and looked altogether like one who has received a severe shock. Appalled, he looked at his disciples. His eyes pierced through theirs, and the thoughts behind their thoughts as with arrows. But after a little while, he laughed again and pacified. He said, "It is difficult to live with people because silence is so difficult, especially for one who is garrulous." Silence is difficult when it's an awkward silence or when it's a silence full of tension. But when it's a harmonious silence, it's quite rejuvenating. Thus spoke Zarathustra. The hunchback, however, had listened to this discourse and covered his face the while. But when he heard Zarathustra laugh, he looked up curiously and said slowly, "But why does Zarathustra speak otherwise to us than to his disciples?" Zarathustra answered, "What is surprising in that? With hunchbacks, one may well speak in a hunchback way." "All right," said the hunchback, "and one may well tell pupils tales out of school. But why does Zarathustra speak otherwise to his pupils than to himself?" Alright. That one is... I like it. This is a great book, I must say. Truly quite nice. So, redemption. So, learning from the people. Hunchbacks, cripples, people who are suffering, blind. Someone who was like a giant ear, who had a tiny little envious face. Who are nothing, and then he mentioned people who are nothing but a big eye, big mouth, a big belly. And so proportions, balance, the butcher field, the battlefield, these fragments and limbs and dreadful accidents, but no human beings. A seer, a willer, a creator, a future himself, and a bridge to the future. Replying to yourself with questions. Who are you? Are you an autumn, a plowshare, a conqueror, a liberator, a tamer? And then that he walks among men as amongst the fragments of the future. Guessers of riddles, redeemer of accidents, and that the will can be a prisoner, and the will liberates, and that not being able to break time, and that time is covetousness, and that the will's loneliest melancholy is that he can't break time, and you can't go back in time, and that time does not run backwards, and that is its wrath. That's so freaking clever. The spirit of revenge. What is revenge? It's the will's ill will against time, and it was. So, and it was kind of a tongue teaser there. Mentions reconciliation, so redemption, reconciliation, and then the pattern of preached madness, so revenge in its relation to madness. Fascinating. What a great section. I hope you liked it. I know I did. If you'd like to support my work and see more about all the different topics I write about, you can go to www.subscribestar.com/Milahan Archive. Hope to see you there.